listener production.
Hey, Benzion Siebert here with The Briefing. Imagine what it would be like to stand on the pinnacle of Mount Everest, the tallest point on Earth. I can only guess it would be the kind of profound experience that makes you a different person after. Then again, I am no fan of mortal peril. Call it a lack of courage or sense of adventure, but there is a lot I will do to avoid the potential risk of death. And climbing Mount Everest is a risky business. Just last year, a record-breaking 18 climbers died trying to reach the summit of the world's tallest mountain. During that same period, Nepal issued a record number of permits to climb the thing. So is it time for a rethink? Dan Stretch is part of the operations team for Global Rescue, which coordinates high-altitude rescues in the Himalayas, including on Mount Everest, and he spoke with The Briefing's Simon Beaton.
Dan, thank you for joining us on The Briefing.
Thanks for having me.
Most of us have probably seen the pictures and videos of so many climbers queuing up in long lines for hours upon hours on high cliffs up on Mount Everest. Is it really like this a lot of the time?
It is, yes. I mean, it depends which day you can go up. Some days people are lucky and there's not so many climbers up on the mountain. But it doesn't take many climbers to cause those conditions. You've got one rope going up the mountain. It's the same rope coming back down. So you can imagine even 50 people, 20, 50 people all on the same line going up. It's very difficult to control and prevent these sort of bottleneck areas.
So with the fewer climbing permits that Nepal issued this year, has that helped lower that congestion or was it still quite bad?
It wasn't as bad as last year. The permits were only slightly less, but still very high if you compare them. I mean, last year was a record year. If you go back 5 years, it's still high this year. And it would be difficult to attribute that to just the permits. I mean, there's so many other factors involved. There's the weather window, how fast they get the fixed lines set up, when they've dictated the season will end, and then the teams, the different climbing teams, collaborate on when they're going to go up. If you have two big teams, they need to try and collaborate with each other so they're not all going up at the same time.
Now, you're involved in the rescue operations that happen around Mount Everest. Tell me, how dangerous is it to climb? How are people dying?
It's dangerous. I mean, there was 8 deaths this year. There was 17 last year. That's, 8 people from probably, if you factor in all Nepalese staff, Sherpas, there's probably 900 people there. But, it's the highest mountain, so anything above 7,000 meters, a helicopter isn't going to come and save you. It's up to yourself to get down. This is where the deaths occur, where people, go up. They can't get down from 8,000 meters. They have to rely on somebody to help them down. And the rescuer is also struggling to get themselves down. The deaths that happen, some of them will be attributed to just spending too long in the death zone, not being properly acclimatized, not having enough oxygen running out.
And that death zone, sorry to interrupt, but that death zone is when you get above a certain altitude, is that right?
Yeah, generally, I mean, on Everest, they would call the death zone above Camp 3, which is around 7,000 meters. You can do a helicopter rescue from Camp 3, but that involves a long line rescue, which means somebody on a rope from the helicopter, so it's quite dangerous. Above that level, helicopters can't fly, they can fly that altitude, but they're not able to land or rescue anybody. But the death zone is really above Camp 3. It's really where they call it the death zone because there's not enough oxygen to sustain life. So even if you're fully acclimatized to a certain level, nobody can spend a long time in that zone above 7,000 meters. Yeah.
So are a lot of the cases that we see where people lose their lives, is it just because there's not enough oxygen, they don't have additional oxygen, it's just that cold, the weather changes? Is it that sort of
case?
I
mean, it's a real strain on your body. Climbing Everest or climbing anything above, 5,000 meters is a massive strain on your body. Some people just pass away and it could be just due to complete exhaustion. They can't carry on. They can't get themselves down the mountain. They might have an underlying condition they don't know about and pass away. People have strokes. People have heart attacks. It's a massive strain on your body.
Wow.
Just exerting yourself that much at that altitude.
When someone does lose their life, if they're in that death zone, which is also where we often see a lot of that congestion and those long lines, does this mean that other climbers are having to walk past those deceased bodies?
It does, yeah, unfortunately. I mean, there are a number of bodies on the mountain that climbers will pass by. There's a number of bodies still attached to fixed, previous season fixed lines. So that is something that happens. A lot of the time, it would be risky to bring those remains down.
Mm.
So yeah, there are numerous remains on the mountain still.
So tell me a bit more then about how you carry out your rescues, in particular when you can't use a helicopter.
Above Camp 3, which is around 7,000 meters, there is a lot of reliance on self-rescue. The team that you've got up there with is going to have to help get you down to a level where a helicopter can land or do a long-line rescue. There are rescue teams, ground rescue teams in Everest. There's other climbing teams, and there's your team and there's yourself. And one of those groups is going to try and get you down to a level that can get a helicopter to. So that's really the options there.
So you said that there was a reduction in the number of permits this year compared to last year, which was a record high, but it still is a lot. Do you think that we do need to see a further reduction in the number to increase safety on the mountain?
That's a difficult one, because you could have as low as 100 permits, which would be like 75% reduction. But if they still all go up on the same day, you're still going to have congestion. So, and with any of these decisions, you have to factor in this is a big income generator for Nepal that they want to maintain. So I think they should be looking at various ways of making the mountain safer. You're never going to make it completely safe. But there are other things they can do rather than just look at reducing permits. You can extend the climbing season. The season ends on the 31st of May, but there's no overriding reason why it has to stop on that date. You could extend the climbing season by a couple of weeks. And then if the weather complies, you don't have as much chance of getting those days, because at the moment people are fighting for a few days of good weather. Another thing that would be a good idea that I've seen discussed before in the climbing community is having more than one fixed line. One rope going up to the summit and one rope coming down is clearly going to get congested. I mean, you can just imagine if you were going to do your weekly shopping in the supermarket and you had to go in on a rope and you had 50 people behind you, it's going to get congested, right? I think Nepal should look at the climbers' experience. They should have to justify that they're capable of climbing on Everest.
I would imagine that there's a correlation between people who need assistance on the mountain and their climbing experience. Is that right?
There is, absolutely. Yeah. You can tell honestly, a lot of people that are rescued, and this isn't just from Global Rescue, my company, just a lot of people rescued could get themselves back down the mountain. Once they've summited, they get themselves down to Cap 2, and there's an option of getting a helicopter to fly them out. That's a lot of what the rescues are. In fact, when they're rescued and they're brought down, they quickly recover. Whereas with the more experienced climbers, they don't want to be rescued. They want to complete the climb up and they want to get back down to base camp. So you do see that difference for sure.
Can you share one of your most memorable rescues that you've done on the mountain?
Probably the most memorable rescue I've done. I mean, there's a fair amount. The one that stands out is, I think it was 2016 or 2017. Somebody that you really thought was going to pass away the death zone, but they're well up above Camp 4, so like 8,000 meters. Sounds very, very sick. Doesn't sound like they're going to last minutes, let alone hours, and they're stuck there. Was able to be rescued by their climbing team. I think, from memory, actually an Australian guy really took charge of it himself and was able to give medicines, maintain this guy overnight, basically with help, carry him down to a level where we could send a helicopter and do a long-line rescue. And, the guy is fine now. The Australian guy got frostbite on his feet and had several of his toes removed just from, the actions he took. So it's very sort of selfless because, everybody's looking out for themselves when they're that high. So when you see people that don't follow that sort of, I'm just looking out for myself. That's the things that stick with me is the people that will, stop their climb. They're not interested in summiting because they can't just walk past somebody. They want to help rescue them. Where you could just say, hey, this is the death zone and I'm going to leave you here. I'm really sorry, which is something that happens a lot.
Thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Oh, you're welcome.
Dan Stretch from Global Rescue there, speaking with The Briefing's Simon Beaton. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. And if you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. Just search Listener Newsroom. I'm Ben Sion Siebert. Catch you next time.